Aimer back with another Mission Impossible episode review. This time I'm doing Season 5, Episode 18, which is called Blast. Okay, so this one starts out at a bank where we see a bunch of dudes wearing some ridiculous masks, I can't even tell who it's supposed to be, preparing to blow open the big safe. It looks like the detonator jams but suddenly goes off, killing one of the guys, but the other three get away with the loot. Jim goes to a park bench for instructions. The mission, one of the men that we saw is named Gregory Tolan, who works for a mysterious underground figure named Jonathan Brace. And Brace is masterminding these robberies in an effort to get money to overthrow the U.S. government. And Brace must be apprehended and stopped. We get an apartment scene. Willie is back again. Tolan's next job will be to take out an armored car from Drake's department store. And Jim and Dana will go in and Brace's operatives, Cabot, the explosives guy, and Monica as a Drake employee, as an insider, to make sure that the heist is successful so that the money can be taken to Brace and then the IMF can trace it and figure out who he is. Driver Juan Delgado takes the real Cabot and Monica to a warehouse to meet their crew. Willie follows Delgado to make sure he doesn't come back to the warehouse. Jim and Dana take over from the real two, and Paris and Barney put them on ice. Tolan shows up shortly to pick them up, and they get together with Klinger and Shields, Tolan's mercenary hoods, and they prepare for the heist. Tolan uses a radio to contact Brace for instructions, and shows them all a blueprint of the building. It's Sunday, day of the heist, and guard Barney leads the armored truck and money into the Drake building, and Willie is also on standby. Dana turns off the alarms for the thieves, as planned, and Jim blows open some of the doors to get in. Barney allows himself to be knocked out as part of the charade. Klinger gets a bit trigger-happy when Willie feigns surprise at Dana assisting the thieves, forcing Jim to divert his arm and make his shots go awry at the window, which sets off an alarm. The police arrive, not aware of the IMF's mission, chase the getaway car, causing a ton of mayhem, and the thieves head to a residential area with the IMF following them using a tracker. Finding a house that's empty, Tolan says they'll stay there until they can figure out what to do next. Tolan starts berating Dana for the alarm going off, but she reminds him that, hey, Klinger was the one who panicked and fired, and other predictable finger-pointing amongst the crew occurs. Jim encourages Tolan to call Brace and laments to Dana quietly that Brace will never come to this house for the money, so the IMF is going to have to give Tolan a way to get out. Jim says he's heading out to try and find another car for the crew to use, upsetting Klinger, who felt Jim diverting his shot earlier was a sign of cowardice. But Jim takes away his ammunition handily and heads out to the IMF van to regroup and make a plan with the others. First, Willie finds another car that the bad guys can use, and the IMF gets the police to find the actual homeowners, the Millers, and take them to the station so they are out of danger. Jim returns and wants to get out of the house, but Tolan angrily tells all of the crew that it's too risky to move, with police still hanging around the area. He says they'll wait for Brace to come to them. So Jim tells the IMF to start Plan B, which involves Paris and a policewoman named Grace impersonating the Millers and coming to the home, setting Tolan on edge at the unexpected arrival. Jim suggests to Tolan that Paris be sent to Brace with the money, keeping Grace as a hostage. Tolan says he will suggest it to Brace, while taking a moment to chat up Dana about wanting to get closer to her. Barney gets close to the house to try and listen to the transmission with Brace at 4 p.m. Tolan suggests Jim's plan, but Brace rejects it, saying that using third parties is too risky. He says that Tolan and Dana are to come to a prearranged meeting point with the money, using the Miller's ID and car. The other three are to leave later in the other car after killing the hostages. Tolan and Dana leave after giving the others their payoffs, and while Klinger and Shields are counting their money, Jim quietly releases Paris and Grace, disarming the hoods and taking their money and putting them in the hands of the cops. Jim and Paris get into the IMF van, where Barney tells them that he couldn't overhear the conversation for some reason, perhaps due to interference, but they're still able to follow Tolan and Dana because of a transmitter they have, and those two return to the warehouse where the caper began. The IMF arrive, and Barney finds Toland's transmitter, which ends up having a tape recorder inside. Inside the warehouse, Dana continues to ask about Brace. Toland tells her to stop worrying about him. The IMF cordon off the building, and Jim and Barney head inside through the roof, as Toland calls out to someone below. Not Brace. Turns out it's Juan Delgado, who of course tells Toland that Dana isn't Monica, and raging Toland, who prepares to shoot her, but Jim catches him in the shoulder first, and the jig is up, with Brace's identity being uncovered. It's Toland all along. Mission accomplished. I'm going to give this episode a grade of a D+. I originally had it at a C-, but I changed my mind a little bit. I'll talk through it, as always. Starting with the good. This is another unique plot, typical of Season 5, where, nothing quite goes to plan. The IMF can't really have a complete plan, given the nature of the mission, because there's kind of too many unknowns. And that's okay. I don't really have a problem with that. The plot is unique enough, and I can't fault it for what the writers were trying to do and what the producers were trying to do. There's some suspense until the end. How things are going to shake out is a mystery until the final few moments, and that is also good. Nothing wrong there. I also like the characters of Klinger and Shields. These guys are funny and entertaining. It was good to see them on the screen. Despite them, kind of being a little bit one-dimensional and not, the sharpest knives in the drawer, as I said, I liked them. Also, the part in the middle about the Millers, when Paris and the policewoman are talking to them, talking about their dog, hey, and, they're just these people who are just concerned about their house, and, there's so much more going on, but they couldn't be bothered about that. They're just concerned about their house and their dog. Okay, whatever. Moving on, though, to the not so good, and the more I thought about it and the more notes I made for myself, the more I found. What an incredible amount of tedious dialogue we have in this episode. It seems to me that, at some points, nobody can even say a sentence or two without talking about Brace. Hey, let's call Brace. What did Brace say? Let's wait for Brace. No, Brace said not to do that. And I'm exaggerating a little bit, but boy, darn it if it really didn't feel that way. That, there's so much emphasis put on this, and of course it is the reason for the mission. I get that. But it's really grating to me. I don't like that. I didn't like that at all. It was just too much. And I have more to say about that as we go on. The characters involved. The guest stars, I would say, are fine. I already mentioned about Klinger and Shields, played by Lawrence Haddon and Kevin Hagen, and the actors are fine, as they are, generally speaking, just about all episodes. Those characters are good. The thing about it is, the biggest problem in this episode, it's twofold. The first is that the payoff just is not worth it in the end. Could anybody look at this episode and say, oh, wow, that was a really great way to end the episode? It reminds me of that episode of The Simpsons. There was a Treehouse of Horror episode, and I think it was the one where they were talking about the poem. Yes, it was. The poem The Raven by Edgar Allan Poe. And Lisa is reading the poem, and she's trying to create this aura of, of mystery and fear and terror and all this. The door opens. Who's there? What's there? Nothing. And then Bart says, you know what would have been better than nothing? Anything. And that's how I feel about this payoff, if you want to call it that, this ending. Okay, so Toland is really Brace, and he's been running this charade on these people, and that's it. That's the ending. That's happened before, especially in Season 5. I remember mentioning this kind of thing in the episode Homecoming, is a good example of that, where, there's a story, and it's not that it's a bad story or anything like that, but in the end, okay, we have an ending, and does it really matter so much? No, it kind of really didn't matter, who the killer was at the end. On to the next show. And here, this is a different situation, of course, but I feel the same way. Like, why do I care? And really, there had to be a better way. I really feel that, the IMF, they choose not to involve the police in what they're doing, or inform the police that, they're pulling this thing. And I'm sure that the reason for that is to make their mission simpler. Their idea is, if they facilitate this heist for Tolan will take his money and he will go straight to Brace, and all they have to do is follow him, and then they know who Brace is. Okay, but I would think that, I just can't help thinking that they could have done something to prevent the whole plan from going completely awry. Without telling the police a whole bunch of details, couldn't they at least have said, hey, just keep your guys away from this building, please? Or something like that. I'm sure there had to be some way of getting that done. I don't know. That's just what I feel there. So the ending is just unsatisfying. That's the one big problem. The second problem is the character of Gregory Tolan, played by Henry Darrow, who is a good actor, but he's one of those actors that I just do not get a good vibe from. The way he comes across, there's so much smugness, there's so much smarm, and there's so much conceit. And in thinking about him, I really gave this a fair bit of thought, so I'm going to talk this out. I don't feel that he is an engaging villain. The lameness speaks for itself. But I find that he's also unengaging. Another one of those villains who, rather than wanting to see them get their comeuppance and see them be defeated, I just want them to go away. And I started to think to myself, why do I feel that way? And I went back and I thought about some of the other villains who share some similarities to Gregory Tolan. And I came up with a few. Just from this season, very recently we had Robert Siomny in the episode The Hostage, played by Lou Antonio. And I felt exactly the same kind of thing. In fact, I said it in the review about Robert Siomny. I said the same thing. Why do I want to see this guy go away rather than be defeated? Don't know. At least I didn't. But now I think I've kind of come into some ideas. Earlier this season, we also had Eric Schilling, played by Anthony Zerbe, in the episode called The Amateur. That character, Eric Schilling, was playing a very, very dangerous game. He seemed in over his head, and that is something that I also kind of felt about the Gregory Tolan character. Eric Schilling was playing a dangerous game with people who are more experienced at the game than he was. The whole point of it is that he's an amateur, and because of his lack of experience, he really doesn't know how to, see anything through in terms of what he wants to get accomplished. Other people can play him very easily. Gregory Tolan is playing a different kind of game, but an equally dangerous game with people involved who are way more volatile than he is. He has to deal with guys who, with trigger-happy hoods and explosives guys and things like that. And frankly, not only are they more volatile, but by necessity, they also have to be a little bit dumb. Before long, anybody who's going to spend enough time with Tolan is going to start seeing through the ruse that he's pulling by creating this Jonathan Brace character, or at least start suspecting something, right? And that is also kind of problematic for me. That I frankly can't even see how Gregory Tolan could have gotten to this point. How is anybody going to work with him more than once or twice? The whole point of what I'm trying to say here is that with Tolan, it's not even really about being intelligent. This character seems to have kind of an inability to kind of read the room and avoid being just supremely overconfident the way that Eric Schilling was, and just lacking some self-awareness. That's problematic as well. I had to dig back deep, though, to come up with, I think, what is the best example of the problem with this character. Let's go back to season 1, the episode called The Legend. I think everybody remembers that one. Yeah, that's the Let Me Be Your Führer episode, where we had Friedrich Rudd. And if you really think about it, and I did, there's a ton of similarities between these two characters. By hook or by crook, both characters have lucked into a whole whack load of money to finance a huge enterprise, which basically involves overthrowing a government and installing their own. At least that's according to the story. Friedrich Rudd wants to, make a Fourth Reich in Germany. And Tolan, as Brace, wants to overthrow the U.S. government, so we're told. So both of these guys are perpetrating the same kind of scam on people. Tolan by creating this Brace character, Friedrich Rudd obviously by using a dummy and dressing him up to be Martin Bormann in order to convince the people that he needs to convince to go along with his plan. And then I thought about it and I said, okay, why is it that I really, really enjoyed Friedrich Rudd as a villain? Even though he was lame, and you can go back and look at that review, even though he was lame, he was entertaining. Why is Henry Darrow as Gregory Tolan not entertaining to me? It seems to me, I'm going to think about it a little bit more, but the main thing to me is that characters like Tolan and Siomny had more interesting characters in their episodes. Tolan has these guys, Klinger and Shields, who are, frankly, entertaining characters, right? You're wondering what they're going to do, and I actually enjoyed these guys, as I Robert Siomny had Jorge Cabal as his partner, in the episode The Hostage. And Cabal was a little bit more of a sensible guy, down-to-earth guy, and a little bit more sympathetic, if you want to call it that. Friedrich Rudd didn't have anybody like that, so he could kind of shine and be the center of the episode. And I think that maybe that also hurts the character a little bit in terms of, the quality of the episode and whatnot. I've mentioned before where we have, and this is completely different, but it's sort of in the same vein. In the past, where we have episodes with competing antagonists, bad guys who have differing motives and things like that. And I've mentioned how that kind of complicates certain episodes. Maybe there's a little bit of that going on here as well. But I hope what I'm trying to say is coming across. That I just don't really see Gregory Tolan as being a good quality villain. And the more I think about it, the more I'm convinced that the grade that I gave it of a D+, I was originally looking at a C or a C- because of the uniqueness of the plot and because of the couple of good things that I found about it. But the more I thought about it, I said, nah, you know what? That guy is just kind of a downer. And I'm going to leave it at that. Thank you as always for watching. It's always appreciated. Please like this episode review. Please subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments. I know things are going on the Facebook page, the Mission Impossible group there, where the comments are becoming, in the noise to signal ratio maybe isn't where it should be. But hopefully you can always leave your comments here, and maybe we can have some good discussions going on sooner than later. As always, it's appreciated. Thank you again, and I'll see you next time.